The comments, opinions, and views shared during this program are of those individual Freemasons and do not reflect the official position of a Grand Lodge, Concordant Body, Appendant Body, Masonic Authority, or CraftsmanOnline.com.
Back to the Craftsman Online podcast, the only Masonic podcast endorsed by the Grand Lodge in New York. I'm your host, Right Worshipful Brother Michael Arce. Ooh, a good one, as we'll be tackling the elephant in the lodge on this week's episode. But first, a quick reminder, you can join us and support the pod on Patreon. Dude, it is awesome. You know, we give you 7 days to try it out, see if it's a good fit, access to our full back catalog of subscriber extra episodes. That's when we get a little extra time with some of our guests, like this week's guest, Right Worshipful Brother Cliff Jacobs. That is at your fingertips. Plus, you don't have to worry about the annoying commercials. Yeah, ad-free episodes of the Craftsman Online podcast on Patreon. If it works for you, just $5 a month, and we appreciate your support. This week's guest is one of my favorite brothers to talk to because his voice literally matches his personality, and he's no stranger to Craftsman Online. You have heard him as one of our panelists on the Reading Room, and I'm happy to have him on this episode of the podcast. Right Worshipful Brother Cliff Jacobs. Welcome, my friend.
Well, thank you so much. Hello, everyone.
I was telling you before we got started how excited I was for this episode because we tried to have a conversation back in January when I was visiting the Valley of New York and your Scottish Rite brothers, and we did a fantastic tour of the St. John's.
The Cathedral of St. John the Divine.
Yes, yeah, that was amazing, and we sat down, and in true New York City fashion, we're sitting real tight in a little cafe, and we're trying to talk about Freemasonry, and just a downpour. Couldn't even hear each other talk. It was just rain was coming, it was bouncing back up at us, and we had started talking about your Masonic career and where things are going, and we were touching onto the topic of this podcast, as we've called it, the elephant in the lodge. We're going to get into esoterics and how important Masonic experiences are, and really bettering yourself either through the interaction that you'll have with your brothers in the fraternity, but also on the personal side, the growth and development opportunities that are there. And as I mentioned, this episode kind of a byproduct of our Reading Room, seeing you at the Valley in New York City, and you kind of being someone who's been established in our Grand Lodge as being a brother who's wise when it comes to esoteric and Masonic education. But that's where you are now at this point in your career. Let's get to the very beginning when just, a young Cliff Jacobs was going up to a door of a lodge and giving those knocks. And what was it like?
My father, he wasn't a Mason, but he passed in 1984. And he was the neighborhood scoutmaster for well over 20 years. He served in World War II in the Pacific. And we found a recording where he had been interviewed on the radio. And he said that he found a greater sense of democracy in the Boy Scouts than he could find anywhere else in American life. And I went, I like that. I like that very much. So his death was very devastating to me. And I started reading over the next 4 years, from 84 to 88, a lot of books on spirituality. I read a great number of things. I'm going to back up just a little bit. When I was in high school, I graduated in 1973. I had a wonderful teacher who taught a class called Being and Non-Being, which focused on existentialist literature. And so we read, Jean-Paul Sartre and Camus and Martin Buber, Kierkegaard. We read a lot of literature, Kafka, Hermann Hesse. And so I kind of embraced existentialism. I was born and raised in Harlem. When I looked around, I couldn't see God in my community. So I came to the conclusion that if God wasn't dead, he has turned his back on our community, and that anything that was going to happen to me, I had to take matters into my own hand if I was going to have a bright future. So for a long time, I considered myself an atheist until my father died. When my father died, I started reading a lot of books. I was searching for something because I guess I felt the void that I was trying to fill. And I read a book which, nowadays most people consider pseudo history, but it just opened my mind to a lot of different things. And that book was Holy Blood, Holy Grail. And I was raised Roman Catholic. I went to Catholic school most of my life. And there were just things in there that I had never thought possible or considered. So when I moved to where I'm at now, basically 42 years ago, I literally opened the yellow pages to see if there was a Masonic lodge near me. And there was one located not far from where I work. So I literally walked up to the lodge, knocked on the door, and said, I'm interested in joining. I didn't have a sponsor or anything. And they gave me a petition, and I filled it out and sent it in with the initiation fee. Initially, they sent it back to me and said, you have to fill this out in your own handwriting. I do calligraphy, and I only write with fountain pens. So I put the same application in a check in a new envelope with a note that says, this is my handwriting. So anyway, in June of 1988 was when I was raised a Master Mason. And so that's really how my journey began.
I think it's safe to say that they don't make men like you anymore.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much.
I seriously forgot to include that key point that when we were sitting at the cafe, there was this box on the table, a small, and I thought it was like a glasses case, but it was your writing pens.
Right.
And you carry them with you everywhere you go.
Absolutely.
And I thought I'd open it up and just see like a nice cross pen or something, but there was that special style. And the one thing that you said about them that has stuck with me was the fact that using those pens, you get a little ink on yourself.
And those of us who use fountain pens, when we get ink on our hands, it's not a big deal. We wear it as a badge, to say, for the cause, so to speak. And being that I went to Catholic school, I went to school at a time when we could not use ballpoint pens. We could only use fountain.
But a little bit of that esoteric allegory is even there, and the fact that you use a pen, that the ink stays with you, the memory is carried on. It's just, it's so deep. I love it. And the other part that shocked me was when you said, I've been a Mason now for almost 40 years. And I almost dropped my fork and I looked at you and I'm like, there's no way. Like, when did you join Mason? When you were 10?
Right. It was interesting because when I first submitted my petition, I was 33 years old.
Wow, that's a bit old to be a Mason, honestly, right?
No, I think it's a good age. Hopefully by the time you reach that age, you're kind of settled with your family, your occupation, and I think it's almost a perfect time. And as it turns out, I'm the third child born in my family, and I'm born exactly 33 years after both my mother and father. They were born in 1921 and I was born in 1954. So it all seemed to make sense to me that it was the right time and it was the right thing to do. And it's certainly one of the best things or best decisions that I've ever made in my life.
Absolutely. And that was the point that got me. When you revealed that, I was like, my dad was born in 55. Like, this guy that I'm having this conversation with, that I'm calling brother, could easily have been my dad. But I want to back up a little bit. And I know you're the kind of guest that I can ask a question to, and this is going to be a great conversation here. Was recently listening to Milos Jeziorski. He's the past master of Angel Millar's Lodge in the city.
Oh, okay. I know Angel.
On his podcast that he does is like a art-focused podcast. He's been talking a lot about the Red Book with Carl Jung. Mm-hmm. And one of the ideas that he shared was this thought that Jung had that men at the age of 35, that's a big age turning point for them, where they realize that it's not a midlife crisis, so to speak, but it's the first point where you realize you're getting older, that you're no longer a young person.
Right.
When you said that you joined the craft at 33, I think I joined around, I would say 33 to 35. Mm-hmm. I was seeking something different at 33, 35 than I would have if I could have joined now, which the youngest age to join in our Grand Lodge is you can be 18 to become a Master Mason. What was going through your mind at that point? Who was that Cliff? What were you seeking?
I don't know what I was seeking. Again, it came as a reaction to the death of my father, and I felt the void, and I wanted to fill that void. And while I haven't read Young's Red Book, I would quote, I think, Joseph Campbell, because he says, not that I'm a hero, but sometimes the hero's adventure begins with the death of the father. And that's what happened to me. That's what set me on my quest. And again, I was reading all kinds of things. I had a lot of Masonic books too. So when they came to interview me and I told them I had been reading books, I had a stack like this that I brought out and showed them that I had been reading. So it was really again, it was that, I had to really turn my back on, my faith, Christianity or Catholicism. And the death of my father kind of brought me back to the fold. And so I was looking for, but I didn't want to just, go to church on Sundays, because that wasn't going to do it for me. I was looking for something just a little deeper. I wanted to go, further down the rabbit hole. I didn't know what to expect, but I could say this from my reading of Freemasonry. I fell in love with Freemasonry in books, on paper. When I finally was raised to a degree of Master Mason, actually, I was quite disappointed with what I found, because I was like, this is not like what I had been reading about. My mother lodge, there always seemed to be infighting and bickering, and it was a real turnoff. And I was very close to um, maybe walking away from the craft. In New York City, in the five boroughs, you'll find that Freemasonry in the boroughs can be very incestuous. You run into the same people all the time talking about the same things. And I knew there was more to Freemasonry than what I was encountering in the flesh. So I started to spend more time in Manhattan, and got involved with the Scottish Rite, where you meet brothers from a broader spectrum. That's when things really started to pick up for me. Brothers would ask me, well, what are you reading? Have you ever heard of, say the Martinists or the Golden Dawn, and things just started bubbling up, and it was wonderful. That's what I needed. I needed to get out of Queens and get to a place where I can meet brothers from a spectrum.
Our listeners probably going, when are they going to start talking about elephants in the lodge room? And what did they mean by that?
Oh, right.
And I did want to get to this point because we're building to this direction. And trust me, listener, we got you. Don't worry. When we talk about the experience of Masonry, you went to the old fable of the blind men describing the elephant.
Right.
And I was wondering if you could kind of summarize that and then also use the wonderful point that you made using that parable.
It's a Sufi parable. I guess you can say it is the esoteric side of Islam, in as much as Gnosticism is the esoteric side of Christianity, or studying of the Kabbalah is the esoteric side of Judaism. But the idea was that, these blind men heard that this creature was coming to town. It was called an elephant, and they wanted to find out what this creature was all about. So they went down, and one of the blind men felt the elephant's leg and says, well, it sort of feels like a tree. It's kind of big and thick around. Another one felt the elephant's ear and said, no, it's flat like a rug. Another one felt the trunk of the elephant and said, no, it's long and slender like a snake. So they each came away with a different impression of what this thing was, based on the part of the elephant that they touched. And I think Freemasonry is a lot like that. If someone comes in, they get together with a group of guys and they want to go out to dinner and then maybe smoke cigars and have some whiskey and stuff. And you ask them as a Freemason, are you satisfied? And they say, yeah, I'm totally happy. That's fine. That's all right. I have nothing against that. If you find that another brother, that becoming a Freemason leads him to other groups and orders, along, for lack of a better term, a metaphysical path, and you ask him, are you satisfied? And they say, yeah, I'm very happy. For each of us, like the blind man, we're going to come away with a different feeling, a different impression. And it's all right. It's a highly individual experience.
While you were talking about it, and I've had a few weeks to go over the email, and just that parable was with me, I was like, I wonder where he's going to go with this. Because I went to this place where I was like, we are the blind man when it first comes in, and Freemasonry is the elephant. We're trying to figure out what it is. And it's different things to different people at certain points. And I got to ask you, this is a master Mason now for almost 40 years. If this is a little bit true, that we become the elephant, the older Mason, the more experienced Mason, when you get past the chasing of the aprons or the titles, or as you mentioned, like the whiskey smoke cigar nights and the fancy plate dinners, to where you become what Freemasonry is. And now you're trying to help these new blind people through this experience so they can get the most out of it.
I like that idea, in that the elephant perhaps also represents a certain type of wisdom. I call myself the tour guide. If I know anything, it's because I've had very good teachers along the path who've opened doors for me and who have helped me. You know, I'm not the person sitting on the mountain that can provide answers for everyone, but I call myself the tour guide. So I meet a young Mason and I engage them in conversation. And I said, well, you know, what are your interests? You know, what are you interested in? Because then I say, okay, well, over here, you can find this particular group if that's what you're interested in. Or if you want to study, you know, let's say tarot, well, perhaps Boda, Builders of the Addendum, that was founded by Paul Foster Case, because that's what they specialize in. And if you want to know where they meet over here on Saturdays. Maybe you should look into that. I just try to direct young brothers in a direction that will fulfill whatever it is that they're looking for. Or I might suggest a book. You know, I'll recommend a book and say, well, look at this and see if this works for you. Because I didn't have a tour guide. I had to do all the work myself. I had to read and look and study and ask questions. And I mean, one time I was working with a Rosicrucian Templar group that used to meet in British Columbia. So I used to go up to British Columbia 4 times a year. So I had to do a lot of work on my own until I met some brothers who served as a tour guide for me as well.
It's interesting. I found myself, I haven't been a Mason for 37 years. For me, it's more around 10. But I have seen in myself, and especially the reflection I see in the mirror every day, I'm no longer the youngest Mason in my lodge.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I'm now falling into the quote unquote older guys, not just because of my physical human age, but also my Masonic age.
Right.
And it was something that no man likes to hear the idea of, that they're aging and getting old. I don't care who you are. There's a little vanity that comes into play there. But to your point, when it comes to sharing the knowledge, I also get it, because those of us that didn't have, and I don't want to use the word good teachers, but strong teachers or a mentorship system, a way for us to scaffold and find our way, right? We had to go find the information on our own. And instead of holding it in and just like being a crab and like, you know, putting it in a secret vault inside of our mind somewhere. No, most of us that have this are looking for that right person, because we know how special it is not to give them the answers to the test, but to give them the inspiration with what we've learned so that they can build on that and come back with something new for us. And that we are still a seeker ourselves. Do you find yourself in that role still?
Oh, absolutely. I'm the perennial student. You know, I'm always learning. And then there's the old adage that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, which I like very much. And I think if when a young Mason approaches me, and if they're at the point where they can formulate the question, then they deserve an answer. You know, that means that they've given it some thought and they have these questions. So when you get to that point, yes, you deserve an answer, you know, because you're onto something. And if I can help them, not so much by giving them the answers, but pointing them in a direction where they can discover it for themselves. And it's all about, you know, this knowledge that we pursue outside of Freemasonry. It's only to try to improve ourselves and make ourselves better. It's not to walk around with our chest puffed out, thinking that we are better or superior to anyone else. That's a little bit of what Bull alluded to in his paper. No, I've never met anyone who was studying the more esoteric aspects, not only of Freemasonry, but other things. I never felt that they were doing it to make an impression on anyone. They were really, truly seeking a deeper understanding of themselves in relation to the world.
The other thing I think you touched on too, there's really a value in perspective. I mean, you can scan all of those books that you mentioned. Can't even recall any of the authors because they were way above what was expected of me in high school and even college. But sure, I could read all those books. I could read all the books in the world, but I don't have anybody to bounce the idea back from. And I think that's, to your point, like, that's why I think so many of our brothers are drawn to you as our elephant in the lodge, because we want to come to you for that wisdom. And that's, kind of back to that point that I had made earlier. It's when you say there's a little bit of ego where you're like, I don't want to be seen as the old wise man. But then there's also that other part where you're like, wow, they are looking to me for some guidance. And now I got to do some reflection before I start sharing this advice with people, because what I tell somebody, how I feel about something, what I think about something, that could impact future actions that they make in their life.
I know of some young Masons who, at least they were young some years ago when they first approached me, and they would pick my brain, for hours. We'll go to the pub and they'll just ask me a million questions. But now I see the same thing happening to them, where the younger men are coming up to them and asking them the same questions that they used to ask me. There are brothers. I mean, like, I'll give a shout out to Right Worshipful and illustrious Michael LaRocco, the librarian. I love Michael dearly. And sometimes when I'm in the city and I know he's there, I just stop by just to sit down and talk with him, because it's always going to be an engaging conversation. So I do seek him out. And there are other brothers too. And it's a wonderful thing, because I have tons of books in my house. I'm overflowing with books. And I remember when I first became a Mason and I was reading a lot of books, and right after I read Holy Blood, Holy Grail, I was so excited. I tried to engage people at work in conversation, and they would all just give me this strange look. And I was like, ooh, okay, maybe I can't talk about this stuff to everybody. So it was kind of lonely for a while, because I was so hyped and pumped up with all this new knowledge and information that was coming to me, and yet it was hard. And as I started out by saying, in my lodge in Queens at the time, it was all about having a ladies' night where someone was going to teach us flower arranging. We had another Masonic evening where we had a fire marshal come talk to us about fire safety in the home. I was like, what? This is this is this is not what I signed up for. Fire safety in the home and flower arranging? I mean, they meant well, but that's just was not what I signed on for. So the path, the path of wisdom, the path of knowledge can sometimes be a very lonely one. And hopefully, if you are a Freemason, you do run into kindred spirits that you can sit down and have these conversations with. But sometimes I think people who don't have the benefit of belonging to an organization like this, it can be very lonely. Who do you discuss these things with?
The other thing too, what I loved about this episode is we kind of knocked down that myth that, the old guys don't want to talk to the young guys.
That's not true.
The old guys are here for the same reason that the young guys are. So young guys, quit being such wimps and go talk to the old guys, because you're going to learn more than you could have read in 5, 10, 20 books. You're going to get literally the Cliff Notes. I love it. All right, I'm going to get you out of here on this one because we are in the advice portion of the episode. And the thing I loved most about, our talk was we talked about the elephant, and we kind of used that parable as our allegory, as our story of Freemasons seeking their way through the craft. And then, maybe perhaps the idea of us becoming the elephant in the lodge. For the brother who is in that blind to trying to, find out what part of the elephant they're touching and where it's going, what is the advice that you would give them if they're just touching the trunk of the elephant? What else is out there for them to find in the fraternity?
If you can, touch the rest of the elephant. Don't stand in one spot. Just keep searching and looking. I don't like when some brothers, older brothers, and they'll stand up in front of a lodge and say, there's no secrets in Freemasonry, But, there are a lot of Masonic organizations where you have to be a Mason to join that a lot of members don't even know exist. They don't even know that they exist. Plus some other organizations that are not necessarily Masonic, it has some kind of connection to Freemasonry. So don't let anyone tell you that there are no secrets in Freemasonry. Freemasonry has a lot of secrets if you're willing to discover them. So my advice is keep searching, keep looking, keep digging, keep asking questions, and travel. Try to go to, visit other lodges, meet other brothers who might be interested in other things. I like to think of myself as a completist. If I'm going to study Alfred Hitchcock, I'm going to watch every movie he ever made, which I did when I was in college because I took a whole semester on Alfred Hitchcock. If I'm going to, talk about Martin Scorsese, I want to see every Martin Scorsese movie. If you're a Freemason, join everything. Join the Royal Lodge. Join Cryptic. Become a Knight Templar. Do the Scottish Rite, and some of the other things, Because one day you might get a letter in the mail that says, hey, put on a tuxedo and come meet us Saturday morning at 10 o'clock down at Grand Lodge. And that's all it'll say. And you might be invited to join something that you didn't even know existed.
Quick point. We're not saying join it all on the same day, but it's there for you. Yeah.
No, not all on the same day. Right. That's like someone said in Scotland, it's like eating, breakfast, lunch, and dinner all at one time. You don't want to do that.
This is one of those episodes I cannot wait for people to listen to. It meant so much for me for you to accept this invitation. And this time, I super value it with us together. I look forward to hearing your voice and your thoughts on our next reading room whenever that comes back. But yeah, until then, Right Worshipful Brother Clifford Jacobs, thank you so much for your time on this episode of the Craftsman Online Podcast.
And it's been a pleasure, and I thank you for the invitation. I didn't think I had anything to say, but I guess I do. Maybe. Thank you so much.
Want to thank our guest this week, Right Worshipful Brother Cliff Jacobs, for his time. We get some bonus time with him if you are a Craftsman Online podcast subscriber on Patreon. Oh, yeah. An extra episode drops this Thursday as we continue our discussion on going through the appendant bodies of Freemasonry, serving the Grand Lodge, and of course, esoteric studies in Lodge. Get your free 7-day trial if you haven't joined us on Patreon yet in the notes for this episode. I'm Right Worshipful Brother Michael Arce. Next Monday, we talk to a brother that I have coined the most interesting traveling man in the craft. Yeah, Brother Sean Moody, or Shonald Connery, as some of you may know him online. He joins us next Monday. Until then, let peace and harmony prevail.